Hello, everybody. It is noon Mountain Standard Time. I am in Calgary, Alberta, on Treaty 7 land. My name is Kristen Dyck. I am the founder of BeABrandedBoss, and I'm a personal branding strategist. And welcome to my first ever LinkedIn Live. I'm hoping this is actually working and that you can actually see me because I'm not on the LinkedIn platform. This is my very first time. Cool. So welcome. I hope that you are here because you saw my posts go out this week where I talked about my live today and what the topic is going to be. And that is imposter syndrome. Something that I think so many of us can relate to, have felt and experienced as well. I just got the thumbs up, so it sounds like it's working. And so I want to tell a little bit more about what I have learned through my personal experiences, through what I have read about others' experiences with it, what I've seen through my clients as well. And so for those of you that hello, Evelyn. Evelyn is one of the big reasons that I'm here talking about imposter syndrome. Her and I had a chat last week on her Instagram channel. We did an IGTV or an IG live, and we got a question about imposter syndrome. And just as that happened, we got all the technical issues and the Wi-Fi problems, and we got cut off, and I was going, I have so much to say about this. So luckily we were able to rejoin, but I realized this deserves some more airtime, and I think that LinkedIn is a really, really good place for it. So thanks again, Evelyn. Evelyn is the CEO, founder of Ellie Bianca, an absolutely fabulous skincare company that is based in Calgary, but is a global business. And she is a really, really amazing entrepreneur and human being. So for those of you who don't know me, who I haven't had the chance to meet yet, I am Kristen Dyck, the founder of BeABrandedBoss, and I'm a personal branding strategist. And that means that I work with driven women to help them reach their goals using my signature personal branding process. So I've been doing personal branding for about 5 years now. And my passion for it, this field just keeps on growing and growing. It originated years ago when I was a communications advisor at one of Canada's largest nonprofit organizations. And I was one of those people who believed that if I just do really great work, put my head down, work lots of long hours, that work would speak for itself. And I was mistaken. I was seeing my peers and colleagues in the organization grow their careers, get to work on some really, really cool and exciting projects. And I wanted to be part of it. And I wasn't really understanding why I couldn't be. What was going on? I was getting some good feedback, but I was stuck. Hi, Michelle. And it wasn't until a new boss joined the organization. She said to me, Kristen, you do great work, but no one knows who you are. And it was really a punch to the gut moment for me, and it changed everything. What ended up happening is I embraced that feedback. I listened to it as much as I didn't want to. And I decided that it was going to be a turning point for me and for my career. And without knowing what I was doing, I started to develop my personal brand, and I got into management. And then I was later asked to be the communications advisor for the CEO exclusively. I remember sitting in her corner office and thinking to myself, I literally went from a cubicle to corner office in a few years. And how did I get here? And I was reflecting and thinking, we need more women in the corner office making the kinds of big decisions, shaping what the city looks like, shaping what the industry looks like. We need more diversity. We need more. We're so strengthened by that diversity, and we need to see more of it. And so I thought, I've learned how to do this for myself. I want to teach other women to do it as well. And so that's when I launched Abro. And that's why I became so passionate about personal branding. And so whenever I talk about personal branding, one of the questions that comes up regularly, and it came up again last week when I was chatting with Evelyn and Ellie Bianca, the question was about imposter syndrome. What do we do about it? So I wanted to talk about that today. I wanted to share 3 things that you might not know about imposter syndrome and what we can do about it when we know that information. So let's dive in. How many of you have felt imposter syndrome? If you have, just say yes, put an emoji in the chat box. I know I have felt that way many, many times. And for those of you who are maybe less familiar with imposter syndrome or are thinking, what is imposter syndrome? Maybe I have, maybe I haven't. Let's talk a little bit about what it is. Well, it's basically feeling like an imposter. It's also known as the imposter phenomenon. It's feeling like you don't belong. You feel like an imposter, like you don't need to be there, or that you shouldn't be there. It's that nagging feeling that people are going to find out that you don't know what you're doing or that you shouldn't actually be here. And for so many of us, it's just an all too common experience, unfortunately. And I see Michelle says, yes, she's felt it. But the first rule of imposter syndrome is that we are all imposters. Interesting, Michelle. Elaborate on that a little bit. Is it that we all feel imposter syndrome sometimes? I'm really, really curious about that. So I'm a big fan of the Harvard Business Review, and I always max out on my 3 articles a month. So I'm going to have to buy myself a subscription. I think that might be my birthday gift for myself this month, because I'm forever burning up my 3 reads of their articles a month. And this last month, February 11th, there was a really great article on imposter syndrome, and it was titled, "Stop Telling Women They Have Imposter Syndrome." I can share the link either later in the broadcast or as a follow-up, just so that you all have a chance to read it. I think it was just really, really eye-opening, and opened my eyes to some other ways that people experience imposter syndrome, and some research into it as well, and some things that I hadn't really considered. So the writers of the article are Rashika Tulshian and Jodi Ann Burry, and it talked about how imposter syndrome is actually part of the systems of oppression that we're living in and that we're all a part of. They explain that imposter syndrome is a result of sexism, of racism, of these systems at work in society and at work in the workplace. So if you're a woman, or if you're a woman of color in particular, oftentimes you are the only woman or woman of color, or maybe neurodiverse person or person of color at the table, in the room, in the building, perhaps. And so you naturally look around and you start to not see someone who looks like you. So you start to question, do I really belong here? And so they talk about in the article that if you feel uncomfortable, if you feel like an imposter, the system is set up to encourage that feeling, to make you feel that way. And they talked about how for most men, they go into a workplace, and the higher up they go within the organization, the more they start to see themselves represented. So it sort of reinforces who they are and what they're doing, and that sense of belongingness. But for many of us as women, we have the opposite experience of that. And so when they're saying, stop telling women they have imposter syndrome, what they're really saying is that this isn't so much a women's problem that women need to solve. This is a workplace problem. This is a social problem. This is a society-wide problem. And I think that's so smart. And I think as I'm learning, and so many of us are learning more about the systems and the systemic racism and misogyny that we're all part of, we're peeling back the layers and learning about all the ways that it manifests and exists in society. And so I'm particularly interested in how it plays out in the workplace. And I think this piece here is really, really interesting. So I'm going back to Michelle's comment here. She's saying, we all don't know what we're doing. And I think that we all have certainly felt that we don't know what we're doing, which brings me to point number 2 about something that you might not know about imposter syndrome. Something that you might not know about imposter syndrome, and it kind of relates to what Michelle is saying, that we're all imposters, but when we feel that sense of imposter syndrome, it's not necessarily like there's anything wrong with us. For many of us, it's that we care. So typically I am like a sweaty Betty. I usually get really sweaty hands, but it's freezing cold in my basement today. So I'm not. But when I do lives, I've done lots of corporate talks virtually, and it's always, stressful to make sure the technology is going to work. I'm like, why am I palm sweating? I do this all the time. Well, it's because I care. And I think it's the same for you. Anytime you are presenting to your team, doing a live video, having a big conversation with your boss or a coworker that is, really, really important, we get nervous. And there's sometimes we're telling ourselves, if I'm nervous, I'm not confident. If I'm not confident, maybe my abilities aren't there. Let's rethink that. It's not that you don't have a strong ability. It's not that you don't have the skills or the aptitude. It's because you care. You really want to, for the instance of this live that I'm doing right now, I want to make sure that those of you who are tuning in, it's either noon for you, it's lunchtime, you're giving me your part of your lunch hour, or it's 2 p.m., you're in Ontario and you've got that afternoon blood sugar crash, and hopefully I can help kind of rejuvenate a little bit about that for you. So I want to make sure that you're having a good experience. I put some planning into this talk today, and I care about it going well. And that's not a bad thing. So I'm curious too, if that is helpful to you, if you can share some of your experiences around caring, and about how you might have felt nervous before and felt that self-doubt creeping in because of those nerves. But let's try to reframe our nerves. Let's try to reframe that as a positive thing about you being a caring person, about you being someone who is thoughtful about the work that you do and who is intentional about how you are perceived and supporting people. And I'm hopeful that that will help change that experience that you might feel as a supposed imposter, because you are most definitely not an imposter. Good to see you, daring greatly. Thank you, Michelle. Okay, so I want to share another thing that I have learned about imposter syndrome. These are things that I've kind of picked up along the way as a person who is working at a big organization and as an entrepreneur. And one of those things, and this really, really changed the game for me, is this. It's number 3. It's the more you know, the more you become aware of what you don't know. Okay, so I'm going to say that again because it's a little bit of a word jumble. The more you know, the more knowledge you acquire, the more education you have, the more lived experience you have in one particular area, the more you become aware to what you don't know about that specific area, that niche, that topic. But remember, you still know more than most other people. You have a lot of intelligence, you are very capable in your area, and your voice and your opinions matter in this area. So I liken it to people who are really into literature. So maybe you were really into fiction and you kind of dabbled in a whole bunch of different areas of books, and you would go to Indigo or Chapters and pick up the Heather's picks or get recommendations from your friends and family. And then all of a sudden you really fell in love with true crime or British crime. And that is, you realize, is a whole niche area of fiction. And it's got this huge, broad history. And at first you feel like you've stumbled into something and you've read some of the really popular authors, and you're starting to feel like, wow, I'm really knowledgeable. I know a lot about this area. When I tell some of my friends about it, they don't even know that that's a part of fiction. They've never heard of these authors. And then you start to stumble upon some online forums and some websites, and you go to a virtual book reading through the library, and you realize, whoa, this is all over my head. These people have been, in this area of literature for so long. They know so much more than me. There's this whole history here that goes back centuries about it. And I've just scratched the surface. And suddenly you're going, okay, now I'm second guessing everything I thought about it, and I shouldn't even say a thing about it. Have any of you felt that experience before, where you're starting to feel good about what you know, you feel confident, you're getting excited about something, and then you peel back some more layers, you start to learn and uncover more, and you realize, whoa, there's a lot more to this that I didn't know about. Michelle is saying, yes, the more we know, the more we hopefully question our assumptions. That's a really, really good point. Yeah. So the challenge is to recognize that this is a positive and not jump into the spinning sense of being overwhelmed. Yes, that is so true. It is a really positive thing. If you love to learn, then it's great. That you can just keep going and keep going. And the trick there isn't to let that self-doubt take over. And look at what you know to be true, which is that so many of your friends and family who were initially sharing what you were learning about in terms of this niche genre of literature, they hadn't heard about it before. They hadn't heard of these authors, and they found it really interesting. So I also relate this to my experience in communications. And, I remember looking for and working with so many of my clients, even today, who are just so knowledgeable about their areas of expertise, about the area of work that they do. But they are also aware of the people that they look up to and that they feel that, know more than them and that they're looking up to and learning from. And they think that no one should hear my opinion and I shouldn't become a thought leader in this area. People should hear from so-and-so because they're so much further ahead. They're leading the charge in this area of work, and I'm a student of her, and that kind of thing. And while that is so humble and that's something that is revered and highly regarded in our society, I want us to think about it in a different way. And so if you are an expert, if you know a lot and you have a lot of experience in an area, the experts that you're aware of and that you follow are probably out of reach for people outside of your industry or without all of the years of experience that you have. But for people with more general level knowledge, people who are coming up under you, people who are in a different industry, people who are just younger than you even, that level of knowledge that you're looking up to is just out of reach for them. It's over their head. But what you have to say and to share is really, really valuable and can be impactful to them and can be accessible to them. So never negate what you know and the impact that it can have. So Jenna Wood says, never an expert in anything. I doubt that very much, Jenna. So I'm curious to know what are your maybe top 3 or a couple of other things that you could add to the list here about imposter syndrome? What have you learned on your journey? So many of us, and I think those of you that are part of the chat right now, we've acknowledged that you felt it before. What have you done to overcome that imposter syndrome? And while I'm waiting, I'm just going to recap what I learned about imposter syndrome, those 3 things that I wanted to share with you. And the first thing is that article from the Harvard Business Review called "Stop Telling Women They Have Imposter Syndrome." This isn't a problem that women necessarily need to solve. We need to check ourselves. We need to be aware of ways that we might be holding ourselves back or getting in our own way and second guessing ourselves. but that there are systems of oppression at play. And we often feel like an outsider because there's no one else in the room who looks like us, who acts like us. We might be the only one. And so it's really natural to feel that way. So while we're waiting for the rest of society to catch up, there are a couple of things that we can do to make sure that we are not holding ourselves back. And I think the first thing is to, one, be aware that that system is at play. And let's all work to dismantle it and come up with something better. So the second part about imposter syndrome that I wanted to share is that being nervous doesn't make you an imposter. Being nervous about standing up in front of an audience, about delivering a piece of work, about having an important meeting with somebody, this is a natural part of growing. And that having some nerves could just mean that you're excited, but being nervous or being a little bit stressed out is a sign, and a really big sign, that you care. You care to deliver to a really high standard. You care to make sure that the people on the other end of what you are providing are going to have a great experience. And that is hugely valuable. That's a competitive advantage. So remember that next time you feel nervous. Think to yourself, there's nothing wrong with me that I'm nervous. I say to myself sometimes when I get sweaty palms, these sweaty palms just mean that I give a damn. And that's a really powerful thing. And point number 3 is that the more you know, the more you become aware of what you don't know. But that does not negate what you know and how much you know. But when you become acutely aware of this, of a world that you're very in tune with, and that there's this huge opportunity to learn more of it, we often feel like we shouldn't be sharing what we know, like we are an imposter in that space. And that is really, really not true. What you know and what you can share is really helpful to the people coming up behind you. So are there any other comments on imposter syndrome? Any other thoughts that people are having about it? Oh, Michelle, I love this. She says, after hearing this, I think that maybe feeling like an imposter actually makes us more relatable. And that's a big opportunity. Absolutely. I think one of the things I've learned is everyone feels like an imposter. Everyone has felt like an imposter. As I've learned and grown from other mentors and in-person mentors, and people that are like digital and online people that share their experience about getting on big stages, they still get nervous. They still feel like an imposter, and it never really goes away. So it's part of, in some ways, this human experience, but really it's just you care. You're holding yourself to a higher standard. You want to be able to deliver the goods. And Rochelle says, yes, sometimes carrying in the workplace hasn't always been considered a good thing. So she likes reframing it. Yeah, I think so too, Rochelle. Being caring and caring about having a high quality of work, caring about how it's going to be perceived and received by other people, that's hugely important. And yeah, I think that might be something that's considered, it's certainly considered a soft skill. It's also considered maybe something that has more attachment to women, or is more common among women, which unfortunately isn't as valued right now, but it's hugely, hugely important. So I'm glad that you like reframing it as a positive. Absolutely. Yeah, so we have a few minutes left here. Yeah, I'm very curious about other people's experiences with imposter syndrome. I know that whether you are starting out in your career, you're mid-level of your career, or if you are more senior in your career, you're experiencing it. And it's really about knowing and reframing it for yourself. Just like Rochelle is saying here, reframing it as something positive. always going to be walking into rooms, hopefully, and if you're not, then you're not really growing, but you should always be walking into rooms where you aren't necessarily the leader or the smartest person in the room. You want to be surrounding yourself with people that you can learn from, that you're growing from, that can challenge you. And so shifting the way that we think about imposter syndrome is a really, really important thing that we can do to overcome that. I think also looking at point number 1 about stop telling women that they have imposter syndrome and looking at those systems at play. I think there's things that we can also do if we are one of the many in the room rather than one of the few in the room. And that might be looking around, seeing who's there, making sure that everyone feels welcome, that everyone feels heard. If we see somebody be interrupted or cut off, that we interject, that we stop. And there's, it happens quite a bit on Zoom too. And I think it gets uncalled and unchecked even more so on Zoom, just because of that split second up to 2 to 3 seconds of delay. And I think that can be a big problem too, but I know it certainly happens in person as well. So as somebody, if you are the one of the many in the room, looking around and seeing who might be feeling like they're the only one, or that they are one of the few in the room, and making sure that they feel comfortable, that they have opportunities to share, and that they feel welcome, and going out of your way to make everyone feel welcome, can really, really go a long way. And that is how we're going to overcome all the challenges that we're facing in our society right now. We're facing so many challenges that we've never faced before. There's no playbook for what we're going through right now. And so we need all of us, everyone at their best, be able to contribute their best, to be able to come out of this. And Michelle saying we also need more voices in the room. Yeah, we definitely need more voices in the room. More voices in the room, more diverse voices in the room. Absolutely. Well, thank you all so much for making my first LinkedIn Live so much fun, so positive. And thanks for jumping in and sharing your thoughts about imposter syndrome too. Feel free afterwards if you have other questions for me or comments about imposter syndrome. I'm all ears. I have no shortage of desire to want to talk about and uncover and learn about this topic. So this is part 1 of possibly many conversations on this topic. And I'm also interested in knowing and hearing from you what else you might want me to talk about, what else we could have a conversation about in future LinkedIn Lives. So send a message, drop it in the comments right here, right now, so that we all can see it. And I'm planning to be back next week to talk about something else. I haven't decided yet, but I hope to see all of you in the room then. All right. So happy Thursday, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. I'm Kristen. Bye, everybody.